Ladies and gentlemen, come to order if you will, please. This is a subcommittee hearing on House Bill 1400, and we want to recognize the author of the bill and also the chairman of the Regulated Industries Committee, Chairman Alan Powell, to make some opening comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, yesterday I presented the bill to the committee and we were on a short supply, being a work day, and a lot of our committee members aren't here. There was some discourse from some of the people yesterday on this. And as I understand, everybody's invited to speak today that didn't speak yesterday. I've encouraged and continue to encourage not only those 6 that were tentatively approved by the Cannabis Commission to come forward with an idea, but also the protesters, if there's a better idea about how to fix the problem. Now, for the benefit of those who didn't understand this clear enough yesterday, what we have is a legal process. And the legal process, or the legal problems, the problems are that we have a Cannabis Commission that was created. And there was a faulty way, the appearance of a faulty way in which they evaluated the applications. There are only 15 plus 1 that actually went through the legislated process of a protest. So you got 2 distinct groups. One is a 6 that were tentatively approved, and then you've got the protesters. Now, this bill simply did a rifle shot way of cleaning that up. I understand that there's a lot of from some of the members of the committee, as well as myself. It looks like there would be a better way of doing this, because just because somebody protested or had the idea to protest without cause, some of the others may have had, there might have been those other applicants that might have had a better game plan. Well, you know, we don't know, but we know that by what we understand from the attorneys is that the only ones that have standing to file would be those who did go through the duly constituted protest period. I have asked a lot of those folks representing the 6 that were tentatively approved to come forward, because I understand what the issue here is, that if anybody files litigation, is filed in Fulton County Superior Court, that's usually a 12. I'm told by the attorneys and legal folks that it's generally a 12, 18-month process to get through the Fulton County court system. Then you've got the Court of Appeals, appeal process, and the Supreme Court. I'm told that this could be a 30, 36-month process to move forward. So that deems to what I had decided, that this is a issue that we could either go forth and have a judicial solution to this, or a legislative solution. A judicial solution is going to delay it that much more. And I keep in the back of my mind that we have over 20,000 families that are impacted by this, that have that qualify currently under that process to get a cannabis card for medicinal oil. Now, that being said, I continue to reach out. Tell me if anyone has a better idea. Quite frankly, I'm a little discouraged that we haven't heard from the 6. And I'll say why I'm discouraged, because if any of the protesters file, then those 6 who have made financial investments to move forward, then they're going to be held up equally. They're going to be held up just like the protesters or anybody else. And that means there'll be another lag time of ever what it takes to remedy the situation in the courts. So for anyone out there in the sound of my voice, whether you're a protester or whether you're one of the tentative, or if you're just anybody that's a lot smarter than me, if you got a solution, hey, glad to hear from it. Some of the members have said they just don't like this idea that we're going to legislate to fix an issue that probably shouldn't have been to start with, but I understand that. But there's only a couple of ways that I know to do it. So if someone's got something else, when you're up here testifying today, lay it out on the line. Let's hear from you. That's all I can say, and open it up for testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do have a number of people who have signed up to speak today, and the first one that we will recognize is Ms. Michelle Dunn.
have access to this. So we are here, as I said, in support of your bill. We want oil to our patients, to our children, and we want this fixed. And we agree that your fix is the one that needs to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Dale Jackson.
Thank you very much. Quite frankly, who I would like to address isn't in this room. I want to make a point, though. If you look behind me, what you won't find are any family members here anymore, because we've given up. You've crushed our spirit. This building crushed our spirits. Before I get into any more of that, I want to clarify just a few things that were discussed yesterday that is a very common misconception in this whole entire battle. But Chairman Powell rightfully asked, how do we get medicine? And unfortunately, I would be willing to bet you that there might be 4 people in this room that truly understand how we get medicine. So I'm going to explain to you. What I've done for the last 7 years is I flew out to Colorado, California, Oregon, Nevada, and I have purchased tens of thousands of dollars worth of medical cannabis oil concentrate to bring back. But you know what? I can't do that anymore. Why can't I do that anymore? Because it is being legalized across the entire country. So while you define it as being legal here in the state of Georgia, and therefore that makes it almost impossible for me to travel to California, Nevada, or Oregon to purchase any, because they're legal. They're not going to give up their $1 million enterprise to help a few families from the state of Georgia. Do you understand that? I need you to understand that there is no place in this entire country that I can go and purchase oil for my autistic 14-year-old son. Do y'all understand that? There is no place in this entire country I can go and legally purchase oil for my 14-year-old son. Nowhere. Okay, because even if I go to Colorado, I have to set up residency. Do y'all know that it was only 18 months ago that the state of Colorado approved autism? 18 months ago. We've been fighting this battle. And again, honestly, you should be ashamed for crushing the spirits of all the families that have come up here. Hundreds of families. And we were told, just do it right. Just follow the process. It just takes freaking time. You lied to us because we've done it for 7 years and we don't have 1 ounce of medicine on the streets of Georgia. I have to drive up to Atlanta every other month and call my drug dealer. And he meets me in a back parking lot and gives me concentrate for my son, who I then go back to my own freaking kitchen and heat up some oil and mix it together. Now, what is the potency of that oil? I ask you. What is the purification of that oil? I ask you. You know what I did one time to try to prove all that when I was helping hundreds of families across the country? My package got confiscated. Nobody heard about that, did you? In 2017, I was sending out samples to Oregon to prove that the oil that I was creating for my own son was safe and effective, and it was the correct dosage. UPS confiscated my package. It got handed over to LaGrange Police Department. They took it before the grand jury. The GBI, you know what the GBI told them to do? Said, do not under any circumstance make an arrest. Why? Why did the GBI tell the LaGrange PD not to make an arrest when they clearly confiscated something extremely illegal? Why? You may tell you why? Because the court system does not want people like me sitting in front of a jury explaining to them how stupid and idiotic it is what I have to do to take care of my own son. I will tell them exactly what I just told you. And you know what that jury will do? They will say, not guilty. And you want to tell what I'm going to do if you don't pass this law? If you do not pass this law, I am going to actively promote every single illegal drug deal I do. I'm going to actively promote every single illegal drug deal that every single family that calls me every single week and asks me for more oil. And I have to tell them, no, I can't help you anymore. I'm sorry. I can barely get enough oil for my own son. Dozens of families every month contact me and ask me for help. But guess what? Everybody thinks, oh, you just have to go across the state line and bring it back. It's not that simple. It is not that simple. And I'm sorry, but I've listened to too much from Governor Kemp, Lieutenant Governor Duncan, and Ralston. The three of you should be ashamed of yourself. You passed this law, you signed this law into place, and it was impossible for it to actually happen. I defended this entire administration for 3 years because every single parent and every other person was telling me they're just dragging it out. This ain't ever going to happen. I said, no, that's not Governor Kemp. That's not Duncan. I'm sorry, until something happens, that is Kemp and that is Duncan. This problem has to be fixed. And frankly, the lobbyists that have been fighting against my families for 7 years, you should be ashamed. You should be ashamed to show your face in this room because you're getting paid to come here and fight against families that had to quit their job or take a day off just to come here and fight for their family. And I'm the only one left. And I'll say another thing to any of you other lobbyists out there. If at any point in time you ever set foot in this room lobbying for the cannabis industry, and now you are trying to stop this bill, Lord help you if I find out. Lord help you if you're one of the 6 that actually do get a license and then sue and shut down medicine for the entire industry here in Georgia. Do that and see how the families of Georgia respond to you. I am not playing with my words. I've put too much into this my entire life. 7 years, and we're looking at 3 more, 10 years. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. I'm sorry to lose my cool, Chairman Powell. You have done everything in your power. And you've probably been one of the very few that have not lied to our families over the last 7 years. But I'm sorry, this has to end. And y'all have to do something. Please convey my message because I know they're not listening. They're not listening to the families either. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. You don't have any questions. Next, we have someone to testify online, Ms. Kristen Goodman. Ms. Goodman, are you there?
Yes, sir, I am here. If I could just jump in, and following Dale is frankly a difficult thing to do. He speaks, I think, absolutely the truth and speaks it on behalf of the patients. And I want the committee to know that that I can speak for my own client as a protester, and I think many of the other protesters that I have had the opportunity to speak with, that we care about those patients and we care about delivering this medicine to the people who need it and the people who deserve it, and to make that happen quickly. I do think that Chairman Powell, and I know his colleagues, have worked hard to come up with a solution that will deliver this medicine without additional delay and complication. The fact is that we were all handled a flawed process, and I think that does not even need to be belabored. I think you've probably all heard from your constituents and others about the flaws in this process. So we're here, and we have 2 options. We really have 2 options. Number one is we can go down the path of litigation, and I think that's unfortunate for everybody. And the biggest casualty in that process is, in fact, the families like Dale's, and nobody wants that to happen. But the reality is that the way that the process has yielded these licenses has given the protesters, the companies who intend to serve the families in many of the outlying areas in the state of Georgia, not just in central Georgia, where the licensees that have been designated as the apparent winners now are concentrated. The families, the small businesses that desire to help these families exist and live in North Georgia. They live in South Georgia, Southwest Georgia, Southeast Georgia. And right now, the process has only yielded licenses for multi-state companies that are owned by by out-of-state shareholders that have an interest in expanding their recreational distribution network. And lost in this process were the small businesses, and most importantly, the families and the children in the other areas of the state of Georgia who need access to this medicine. So we can go through the litigation process, and to Chairman Powell's point, and I'm a litigator, and I know from the cases I have sitting around right now, 3 years is ambitious. We would probably be talking about a longer period of time. The second option is to pass the legislation that Chairman Powell has worked hard to come up with. And there's a couple of reasons that I want to encourage you all to support this legislation and to encourage your colleagues to support this legislation. And one is what I've already referred to, which is the centralization with these few licenses that have been handed out. Associated with those licenses are 5 dispensaries each. So we're looking at potentially having 6 licensees concentrated in Middle Georgia, all within driving distance of Atlanta. Each of those having 5 dispensaries, which gives you 30 dispensaries in a state of 159 counties. The patients who need access to this medicine are going to be underserved. And my client in particular, I can tell you, has worked very closely with physicians. We have 2 physicians on board with us. They are not shareholders. They're certainly not shareholders who are sitting in Connecticut or Florida waiting for a big return on a monopoly. They are physicians who treat neurological patients. That we have a neurologist, we have an immunologist who for years have been treating people who are sick of paying money for pharmaceutical drugs that are ineffective and don't help their children and their families. These physicians have studied the cannabinoid system. They know what these families can afford. They know how desperately these families need this medication, how efficacious this medication can be. And they have committed themselves to treating patients in these outlying areas that will not have access to this medication geographically if we have no more than 6 licensors who are captive to big companies sitting in the middle of our state. We need small Georgia businesses serving by Georgians for Georgians, as you all recognized when you passed this initial legislation. We also have the issue of cost, and we have seen in other states when there are only a few licenses available to big companies, that medication is prohibitively expensive, thousands of dollars for small doses of oil. This is not covered by insurance. These are families with not the kind of means to go laying out that kind of money. So just like any other access to any other medication, and who hasn't seen it in the general pharmaceutical industry, if we do not have availability and access where these families need it, we are making them further victimized. So we believe that the only way that we can fix this process is to do as Chairman Powell has suggested: expand the access, expand the ability for these patients, and hasten this. We are ready as the licensees who have already been designated as potential licensees of what you all are here discussing, that those protesters are equally ready to move forward and bring this to the people who need it immediately. And I want to thank the chairman and the other individuals, the families. I've actually met with Dale as well, and I know how passionately he feels about getting this. I want you to know that the protesters do as well. I want to thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Goodman. Next, we have Chuck Clay.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name's Chuck Clay, for the record. I am a lawyer, been practicing for over 40 years, and I've served here 6 or 7 terms in the Senate. So I've served both in sitting on your side, trying to judge what is right, what is proper, balance the people's interests, balance the legal framework or concerns one might have when dealing with complex industries and cures and medicines. This is what it's all about. I represent Pure Peach Therapeutics. And yeah, do I have a self-interest? I'm not going to sit here for a minute and tell you I don't. But the self-interest also coincides with the desperate interest and need on behalf of Georgians. I was asked to come up. I'm not going to come up here and give the kind of passionate speech. I think it would almost be insulting for those who have loved ones that desperately need this medicine. But I was asked to say just a few words about the process. You know, back in law school, you heard words like due process, equal protection. What does it mean? Are those just ephemeral concepts that we throw around when we don't like a result? Violated due process, violated my equal protection. No, they actually do mean something. And it's not idle chit chat. Fundamental due process is initially what you think it would be. What is due process? To have an issue determined, conclusions reached based on the evidence available and presented to you, and come up with the right result that can be defended on appeal of having complied with all the fundamental, you cut me off, maybe that was good, fundamental measures of due process. We were put together, I'm sorry if this is cutting off and on, is that? Okay, it cuts off. When this process began, we're a state that's replete with protections for due process. The DOAS has processes in place for determining state contracts, state bidding processes. That was not adhered to. It was not adopted. Certainly the APA, the Administrative Procedures Act, has similar processes that have been recognized for years and decades, not just here, but all over the country, to how to preside and move an issue along in a framework that is fair and reaches the proper result. No fault. When the statute was passed, and I voted on some things that I look back later and said, what in the world was I thinking? Well, it's not ill will, but we didn't know. The legislature didn't know. I don't think for a minute that anybody was foolishly trying to go off and create problems so they can come back and listen to this again. But we did not adopt any of those procedures. We created a new commission. We put 8 lay members with no background or true expertise in this area. You hired a very distinguished and capable executive director, and his budget looks about like that. And again, it's not a blame game. That's a fact. That's part of due process. Imagine yourself, right? Take me. And they were going to redesign and rebid a new plant Vogel. And you plunked on my desk and maybe 7 other people, men and women just like me, and said, here's 100,000 pages of a nuclear power plant. Now you go out and judge them, rate them, and come back and tell us what it is. And by the way, there is no discovery. There's no transparency. We have a process that's utterly opaque. And at the end of the day saying, well, that's it. We've done our job. I don't think so. And y'all know that. Y'all know that. So when we talk about due process, what does that mean? Well, we had an executive director with no staff. You had a commission that's judging all these tens of thousands of pages, doing their best effort to come up with 6 licensees. And I'm not for a minute here to contest the legitimacy of their putative wins. But what I am telling you is that folks don't get it, don't understand it. There was an appeal process. There is an appeal process. That is part of due process. A certain number of folks filed protests. One of the other fundamental tenets of the practice of law and doing the due process, and I know we're not in a court of law, nor is the commission a court of law, but if you don't preserve your right to appeal, if you don't preserve your right on the record, it is waived. That isn't discussion. That's black letter law. And I'm not saying it applies here, but I can tell you it applies over there in the Fulton County Courthouse. Judge is going to know that. And then we have an appeals process where there's no exchange of discovery. Well, it's proprietary interest. There are proprietary interests. Lawyers have been dealing that with for 100 years. You put a record under seal, you'll take it before the judge, and they'll determine whether or not what should be shared amongst other folks. Nobody wants it. We don't. I don't think anybody else does. But when you go over there, and now we had the process, and the reviewing officer, the judge on the appeals, was assigned to who? The executive director. The very man who had to make decisions on the licenses and then asked to judge on the appeals of those he turned down. Wonder how that might turn out. That ain't due process. So I'm not telling you, you have to adopt a Civil Practice Act in this room. You don't, nor should you. But what I'm telling you, at some point in time, when this goes from here over there, I'm not ever going to predict what a judge will or will not do. But this goes from here over to there, you're likely to find a judge that says, what? And you know what that judge can do? He will slap on a temporary restraining order, an injunction, and say, stop, stop. And when the judge says it, you stop. You can appeal it, you stop. So where are we? Folks have said, well, I don't like to be bullied into having lawyers bully us into making decisions. Well, chairman up here knows, because I was around, so is former Representative Dunn here. Lawyer said, we're not going to have the federal courts tell us how we operate jails. Oh, yeah? How much did that cost? $1 billion. One judge signs a mandamus and saying, you're going to do this, and you're going to come in every week, or at least once a month for the next, until you reach all these standards. You're going to be here on Monday morning, and we're going to go over exactly every penny and nut and bolt that you've purchased, bought, and implemented. Not saying it will, but it's not idle. This is real stuff. How do you get to the patients? Yeah, I've got a self-interest. I say if you didn't preserve your right, to appeal, you've waived it. That's up to y'all. Y'all can pass any legislation you want. But I am telling you, these are not idle lawyer threats. You're not caving in to lawyers. What you're trying to do is prevent lawyers from having permanent employment over there in Fulton Court, the Court of Appeals, and the Supreme Court. I'll tell you what, that's a whole lot more money than me sitting here now arguing to you. I just think we've got to look at it. Don't look like him, them, we against us. We all want to get out there. Do I want to win a license? Does Pure Peach want to have a license? Do we think we're the best? We're all Georgians. We didn't come from anywhere else. We're all Georgians. Our investors are all Georgians. Our board is all Georgians. We are a Georgia company, and we want to be out there with those competing in a free market to do exactly what this gentleman and others have said. So as a lawyer, I'm telling you, don't be buffaloed into thinking that somehow we're caving in to the bar or caving into lawyers. It's reality. We're in a place that you've got to seek a solution. I think the bill that's up here is the best that I've seen. And again, I'm all ears, but it's the best I've seen. And kicking the ball down the field or down the road for another year, 2 years, 3 years is simply not acceptable as a matter of morality, as a matter of policy, and for the importance of this committee who's made a commitment to the people of Georgia to get this out here. Adopt this daggone bill, and let's put the lawyers back in their offices where they belong and get the product out on the street where it's needed. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Ms. Adrienne Lance Lucas by Zoom. Is she available?
I am. Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to come on and say a few words. I'm representing Aspire Medical Partners, and we all are here for the same reason. We want families to be able to receive access to the medication that they receive, and we'd like for them to receive it now. And based on where we are in this litigation, we're looking for that path forward. I want to just talk just a little bit about why Aspire and why we are involved in this debate for the House Bill 1400, which we support. And that is really looking for Georgia to become a center of excellence for medicine. With our supporting partners, the Medical College of Georgia and Mercer College of Pharmacy, we think that that opportunity exists. And it helps to expand the industry that exists today so that Georgians have the best opportunity for this medicine to treat their families. We plan to operate in Tier 1 county, which is Warren County, so that we can focus on economic development and underserved counties. And I strongly suggest that the committee consider supporting HB 1400. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lucas. The last we have signed up is Mr. Wesley Dunn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'll be brief. I'm going to tag on with the comments previously made by Dale Jackson and Kristen Goodman and Chuck Clay. I can't add anything to that. They speak the truth of where we are. As somebody that's been involved in this process since the first bill 7 years ago, sometimes working without a client, but we just tell people we made a fatal mistake of getting emotionally involved with the issue after meeting some of the patients and parents of patients. And our hearts went out to them. And I represent Revolution, Georgia now, and Jacob Issa in our firm is not here. He represents Windflower, both protesters. And I think he will tag on to our remarks as well. A couple things I want to point out of what might not have been said. All of us that are protesting probably the process. The House of Representatives and over the years adding conditions, and then in House Bill 324 3 years ago had a pretty good bill. And most of the problems with our legislation today occurred in the Senate with changes they made, quite frankly, by a couple of loud senators that didn't want to get this medicine on the street at all, and made some changes that actually flawed the process. And added to that, we have 7 people on the commission that are fine individuals. There are 3 doctors that work in the industry and know a good bit about it, but the other members are lay people like anybody. And as Dale pointed out, not professionals. And I guess it was Chuck pointed out, not professionals, and alluded to the situation with approving a Vogel plant. But the commission was advised to hire a consultant that would blindly look at these, and that was qualified, and they didn't have the money. And that's a problem of the legislature not in appropriating the money for the commission to actually get the tools and the consultants they needed to do an adequate job. I don't think any of us are slighting the 6 potential companies with that are set to get licenses. But the way the scores, I can't say that they're any more qualified than anybody else. And that's one objection that I think all the protesters have, is the scores don't mean anything the way it was done and accomplished. And certainly the protests are flawed, because the executive director of the commission is also the hearing officer, and that's a direct conflict of interest for the whole process. In his remarks, when this commission was set up, the governor stated that he wanted Georgia people involved. He wanted geographic distribution. He wanted these companies located in economically depressed areas. One issue that came up, I think Jacob mentioned the other day when he spoke, his company got graded down because they were in a tier 1 county, but they touched a tier 3 county. And the law says you get credit for locating in tier 1, tier 2 county. It doesn't say anything about touching anything else. One of our clients, also Revolution, had the same issue, got graded down for that. Another grade down was for several companies had the same application writers that wrote 3 or 4 applications. One company would get 100% of the points. Other companies got graded down and got half the points because the comment said, well, this language is similar or identical to somebody else's application. It's almost like they were grading you on plagiarism. If you have a best practices program, it's duplicated. These application writing companies have canned language that they paste, cut and paste, and all these in different states. So if it's good in one place, it's good in another place. The governor also directed the commission, he wanted geographic disbursement. I don't know of a single one of the 6 members that are located far north of I-20. Certainly nothing in Atlanta, nothing in North Georgia, nothing in Southwest Georgia. I don't think there's anything in Southeast Georgia. Closest thing down there would be Adel, and that's truly one of the class 1s. And there's another one out east in Lewisburg, a class 2, but nothing is very far north of I-20. And so the north half of the state is not represented at all, nor is the southwest corner. Now, I've heard some opposition to the number of licenses going from 6 to 22. If you look at states that have medical cannabis laws that are similar in size to ours, such as Illinois and Ohio, Illinois has over 20, Ohio has over 20. Smaller state like Maryland has like 25. Florida, for example, started out in the 20s. A lot of the folks that didn't get licensed went to court, and now they have 40 something licenses ordered by the court and cases down there. So what you're doing is not unprecedented in the industry. Also, with the number of dispensaries that are called for, that would give us 110 total dispensaries in the state. I don't think that's an unusual number for the size of land area we have. And the patients are dispersed all over the state, not just in Atlanta, Columbus, and Augusta. Pennsylvania, for example, has 150 dispensaries. So the numbers all match up with other states that have this going on, and it's nothing unusual about that. You know, as far as the 6 potential winners, any of those companies that file a lawsuit would be in the same position as if a protester filed. Still going to go to court, still going to get tangled up, and still going to take additional time. We got into this years ago on behalf of patients. We're still advocating on behalf of patients, even though have an interest in representing a client. But this is all about patients and getting medicine to patients as quickly as possible. As Dale said, they've been waiting for 7 years. A lot of them are putting their families at risk. They're violating federal trafficking laws. They could lose their whole fortune. I mean, the fines on trafficking start at $250,000, I think. You can go to, your property can be confiscated. And that's what these parents are faced with when they go out of state and try to get medicine. And as Dale said, they can't do that anymore because the way laws have changed over the places. And so they're having to go on the street. They don't know what they're getting. That's one of the reasons Michelle and I founded SAFE, and Dale is a co-founder of that as well, to try to make sure the patients get the safest medicine possible. And that's a nonprofit, and it's part of a foundation set up for that too, to give grants to patients that don't have the money to pay it, because this stuff is expensive. So if anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. I've been working this for a long time. Otherwise, I appreciate your efforts, Chairman Powell and members of the committee, and trying to deal with this problem. And at the end of the day, forget about us, the 6 winners and the 6 protesters, and try to do something to help the families, because that's what we all hear about. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. And next we have Mrs. Kellen Carr.
Thank you, Chairman Washburn, for allowing me to speak. And I'd like to thank Chairman Powell for bringing forward this very good piece of legislation, as well as the committee for the ongoing and the good dialogue. I'm Kellen Carr, and I'm here today on behalf of Georgia Bioscience Research, Inc. They are one of the 16 protesting companies. They are a company that is entirely 100% Georgia-based and Georgia-owned. Their plans were to locate in Tift County, and they protested really for one reason, and that was that this wasn't an open and transparent process. You know, you can go online and see the applications, and hundreds of pages were redacted. We also had a lot of concerns that this wasn't done through a blind scoring. A third-party grader wasn't utilized. And so we followed every letter of the law. And part of that was, if you did want to protest, then you had to put that in within the timeline. And so, you know, I have heard concerns, you know, why should the 16 be awarded? Why shouldn't we open this back up to the 69? I would argue that the 16 companies are the ones who complied with every letter of the law. They're companies that followed the protest procedures that are clearly outlined, you know, in statute. And we did do that. And so the companies who didn't, you know, forego those rights. The other thing that I want to focus on today is really just the cost. 22 licenses in the state of Georgia based on our population is an adequate and good number. What we have seen in other states who have limited the set of licenses, such as Arkansas, we saw this in Louisiana. The only thing that does is drive up the cost of medication for patients. And so if the state wants to control and highly regulate this industry, it doesn't need to be done through a limited number of licenses. That's only putting the burden on patients. The only thing that keeps the cost of medication down in this industry is market competition. Insurance doesn't cover this medication. So unless you have a healthy market and an adequate amount of licenses based on population, all we're doing is burdening families, and they're not going to be able to afford the cost of medication. And another great thing about this piece of legislation is allowing that House and Senate regulated industries committees to do oversight. I think this should be a highly regulated industry. It should have good oversight. I would encourage auditing. I would encourage inspections. I would encourage 24/7 surveillance and security. Those are ways that you can control the market, but not let it be a burden to patients. And I'm going to leave it there. Thank you, Del, for that, very passionate testimony. Thank you, committee, again, for hearing this good piece of legislation. Thank you, Chairman Powell. We are appreciative. And I do ask for your favorable vote for House Bill 1400.
Thank you, Ms. Carr. We will open this up now to members of the committee that might have any questions or comments they'd like to make before we let the author of the bill, Chairman Powell, have a few comments to close. So are there any questions or comments by the committee members?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I chaired that subcommittee that heard this legislation a couple of years ago. Was it 2 years ago, 3 years ago now? 3 years ago. Time gets away from me. And I said then that we spent an awful lot of time trying to legalize something that you could go on any street corner in this state and probably purchase as much as you possibly could. You can right now go into any community in this state and you can purchase marijuana. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. And it's just a shame that we've let this bureaucratic process take over and prevent these families from getting this. And Chairman, I'm with you, behind you 100% for whatever that's worth to fix this and get it fixed. I don't think anything's going to be perfect, and it is a process, and it's a sloppy process sometimes, but I want to do whatever I can to support this bill, to get this thing going, to get this product to these people. I'm just glad to be here. It's late in the day, but I know this is an important piece of legislation, probably one of the most important pieces of legislation that we're going to hear this year and take up, because it's going to have an impact that will positively affect people that need it. I've got constituents in my district who have told me time and time again that this oil has helped their child. And I've seen firsthand what it does for folks. And I just want you to know that you can count on me, and I'm happy to support this.
Thank you, Chairman Collins. Anyone else have a comment that you'd like to make? Mr. Chairman, author of the bill, if you'd like to make a closing, any closing comment.
Thank you so much. I regret that we don't have as many of the committee members here because of other committee action. And I regret that we still haven't heard. I hear rumblings from some of the chosen six. I hear rumblings from the chosen six that keeps coming out. And I understand the politics, and I've been accused of a lot of things, but a hypocrite ain't never been one of them. But we know as a committee what this purpose was about. It was restricted to six, and we know why so many people applied for licenses. You could probably grow enough cannabis in 1 or 2 operations to supply all the oil. But this was done mostly, I think a lot of people were betting on the come line to get a license for the future, because it's almost like a New York City taxi medallion. And they're betting on the come that at some point it's going to be recreational. I don't know if it will do it in my time of service or not. But this isn't about recreational. This is about producing medicinal cannabis oil. Now, I will implore, and I'm going to challenge those folks out there, those folks who have been pre-approved, because they have legal standing. And it's not just the protesters that can file a lawsuit. It's also those 6. They can file. But, and I know they don't like the idea there's going to be more competition, but I tend to be one of those free enterprise type people that believes, throw it out there. And, whoever's got the better mousetrap will be the one that survive. Few issues in the original bill gave them 12 months to start up after issuance of the license to start it up, produce and have product in the dispensaries. So, there's a lot of things that affect this, but I want to implore the folks out there today, at the next meeting, and there'll be another hearing or two to this to see if somebody will come up with a better idea. I'm like a lot of people, I'm not necessarily wed to the idea of putting 22 licenses out there. But if that's the only way to get it product going out there for the benefit of these people that deserve or need this type of medicine, then so be it. But I will say again, by the time of the next meeting will probably be first part of the week, come forth. Don't be playing these games and we're hearing things behind the corporate walls of this and that, because this is a real issue that needs to be addressed. I freely admit that I'm not the brightest or the smartest fellow in the world. I'm not an attorney, but I know that when I have the attorneys that I've talked to that talk to me about due process, and they talk to me about the protest and such as that, one of the speakers said it exactly right. It was a flawed process. When it was put forth, it was flawed. There wasn't money put into it for third-party blind consultants. As I look at it, and I really can't judge it, but I'm not too sure that if they'd had the money, they'd have necessarily done it. Because as you well know, they won't answer a question there. I've called the commission chairman 2 or 3 times since last week. I told he'll get back to me when he can. Well, I hadn't heard from that. And, people know my patience level. If they think that means something, you know how I feel about that. The executive director, states that under the existing law, he can't say anything. He can't answer any questions. And that's quite a disappointment. But, I'm going to take him at his word and give him the benefit of the doubt if he thinks that's what it is. But this is a very real issue. And I would advise and hope the people of Georgia who have compassion for their fellow man, that it's been proven that this cannabis oil that helps these patients that the legislature has deemed a necessity, they'll step forward, lay their cards on the table. If they got a solution, give it to us. Something that gets this process moving quicker so that it's done quicker than the past 3 years that we've been dragging it out. And I would suspect there'll be a meeting held probably the first of the week, if not 2 more meetings or so, or whatever it takes, because this is a legislative process. And we do have to deal with another house, and God knows what happens if it gets over to there. So I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank the committees, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think it is worth saying again today. I said it yesterday. I want to thank Chairman Powell for the hearings we held about this and for the action he's taken to drop a bill. He has said it a number of times. I will say it again. If you have an idea of how we might solve this better, please bring the idea forward. The chairman has said that repeatedly. The situation is we have sick folks who need this medicine, and these delays are ridiculous, and it is time for us to do something about it. And so we're in the process of holding these hearings to try to move this bill forward. Or if somebody has a better idea, I'm sure regulated industries will be willing to listen to that idea, and Chairman Powell would be willing to listen. But I want to thank the chairman again for holding the hearings to explore what's going on and what's wrong here. And I want to thank him for bringing this bill. And I appreciate y'all being here today, and we will be holding some additional hearings next week to continue to try to come up with a solution to this problem, to be able to deliver some medicine to some people that need it. Without objection, the subcommittee will stand adjourned.